Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is The Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
Don't worry, my friends, this is not going to be a depressing show. You saw the word death in the broadcast title and you thought, oh no, this is going to be a total downer. No, it's not. You're going to have a good time. We're all going to have a good time. Because, unlike many, I think that death is not necessarily a depressing subject. I mean, think about the times that you've been talking with friends, and I don't mean you're at a wake or something and you're discussing the dearly departed, but you're just talking philosophically about death. You're musing about life and death with friends. You guys are sitting over a cup of coffee or a glass of wine. You're sitting over dinner, and someone starts to talk about, well, you know, when I go, I think I'd like to go like this. And someone else at the table says, well, when I go, I'm thinking I'd rather go like that. And then for the funeral, I think I'm going to do this, maybe cremation. Someone else suggested that I be buried over here. And then a third person chimes in. I think I'd like to be dressed in my favorite clothing, or I'd like to be holding my favorite book, or wearing a certain cherished piece of jewelry. All right, this will go on for just a few minutes, a very few brief minutes, as they talk about the ending of their lives and how they would like to be prepared in death, okay? And then somebody in the circle is going to say, God, this is really depressing and morbid. Let's change the subject. Try it. Try it tonight. Tell me how long it takes before somebody in the group is like, ooh, this is really dark, man. Let's talk about something else. Why is that? Here in the United States, we don't talk a whole lot about death. We know the basics. I pass away. I've assumed room temperature. I bought the farm. I'm counting worms. I'm dead as the dodo. I'm on a Texas cakewalk. I kicked the calendar. I'm pushing up daisies. I'm riding that pale horse into the sunset. I shuffled off this mortal coil. I've been deleted. I'm at rest. I'm belly up. I cashed in my chips. I was written out of the script. I'm about to buy a wooden condo. I checked out, flatlined. I kicked the oxygen habit. I'm stiff as a board. I'm taking the great big nap. I know the basics. They take me down to the embalming room. They embalm me. They put some makeup on me. They stick me out on display, and hopefully, somebody's mourning over me. They dig a hole, drop me in, say a few nice words, boom. I mean, I get that. I mean, I know what happens in the general sense, right? We all know what happens in the general sense. But beyond that, what happens down there in the embalming room? And not in, like, just a gruesome, macabre way. Not in a horror movie way, but what happens? What do they do down there? When I pass away, when my time comes, if I choose to be embalmed or whatever, what do they do down there when I'm on the slab? We're going to find out today. I'm going to talk to a mortician, a funeral director for many decades. We ran into each other at a tour stop in Kansas last year. And of course, I'm probing him with questions. And I'm like, well, I got to have you on the show sometime. And he's going to be here. And he's going to take us down into the depths. He's going to talk to us, not in a gruesome way, but in just a matter-of-fact way. Here's what happens to us when we die and are prepared for the standard burial. We're going to talk about some of the weirder things that he has seen at funerals. You know, families are quirky anyway. And when people pass away, some people pass away, Their lives having had a sense of humor, they decided to be the same in death, so they pulled some stunt at their funeral. We're going to get into some of that. I think you're going to be wildly entertained. Speaking of funny funerals, I was looking through a series of stories that were posted by funeral directors, things they had seen in the course of their careers at funeral homes. And some of this stuff is just crazy. One story was submitted by a guy named Dylan. He said, I had a woman preach the funeral of her own son. After calling him a litany of derogatory names, she then proceeded to call her boyfriend, who was younger than her deceased son, called him to the front podium, and then asked me to play that song. And as I played Amazing Grace, she and her boyfriend slow danced in front of her son's casket. Another story was about an old woman. She lost her husband, and his ex-wife and their 3 older kids and his brother planned the whole funeral. But the widow herself was locked out of the process. The wife left behind, she was not allowed to participate in family politics, right? Well, apparently this guy who had just died was a big Frank Sinatra fan, and so the family had engraved on his headstone, he did it his way. Well, the widow wasn't happy about being locked out of the funeral, but she had the last laugh. She went and purchased the burial plot right next to her husband's, and she left instructions as to what was to be written on her headstone when her time came. Going to have an arrow that points to her husband's "he did it his way," and her stone will reply, "That's what I let him think." Somebody reported on Reddit the story of a funeral director who was asked to put a glitter bomb inside the casket of the deceased. And during the funeral, the glitter bomb would go off and shower glitter upon the attendees, and then the organist would play the song "Thanks for the Memories." According to the report, the funeral director actually agreed and did it. How about the story of this 86-year-old great aunt? She was bigger than life. And, she wanted to sort of continue her legacy in death. She was Catholic. She had a Catholic funeral, but she was also a big fan of the bottle. Her drink was whiskey. And so her last request was that everybody do shots at the gravesite, and that her coffin be sprinkled, not with holy water by the priest, but sprinkled with Jameson. And I guess the priest just had a shit fit over it. But her last wish was granted. Shots at the gravesite and a casket sprinkled with Jameson. Here's to a life and death well played. Here's a story that was carried on WCAU, Pennsylvania's Channel 10. It carried the story of Kenneth Tex Roberts. He died back in 2009, and they gave him a funeral at the James Hawkins Funeral Home in Philadelphia, okay? Now, his widow was a bit concerned because her husband had been prepared for the open casket thing, and she was given kind of a first look before the ceremony, and she said, this isn't right. He doesn't look good. And then she said outright, "This is not my husband." Well, the employee of the funeral home, he assures her, right? This is just what happens to people when they die. They don't always look totally natural. Sometimes their features change. They often don't look quite like themselves. It's okay, perfectly normal. And he convinced her. So the next day, the funeral service commences. More than 200 mourners passing by the casket right before they actually start the service, the proper service, okay? Some people were touching his hands. Some people leaned down to kiss him. The viewing happening right before they start to memorialize the guy. Tex is there. He's resting peacefully in his best Sunday suit. The problem is, his widow was right. It was not actually Tex. Right before the funeral was about to start, the funeral director comes out. He's all panicked, and he takes the family aside, and he says, "I am so sorry. There's been a mix-up." Well, pandemonium ensued. Family members are all weeping and crying and sobbing, and there's a 19-year-old at the service. She was so stressed that she triggered into a seizure. Another woman hyperventilated. She had an asthma attack. It's pandemonium. And then it got worse. When the funeral home finally found the body of the real Tex Roberts, they found him in the back of a hearse at another funeral home that was owned by the same people. And when they opened the back door of the hearse, his legs were hanging out of a tipped-over casket, apparently jarred open because the hearse driver hit some speed bumps while driving too fast. It's right there on WCAU Channel 10. You can go look up the story if you want. Since we're doing a show about death, I had a listener named Walter. He said I should go check the website, deathclock.com. So, per his request, let us go there, my friends, deathclock.com. Death Clock, the internet's friendly reminder that life is slipping away. Welcome to Death Clock. Like the hourglass of the net, the Death Clock will remind you just how short life is. And asked me to put in my day of birth, so that's the 12th of April, 1968. Sex, male, mode, normal. Oh, I can choose I'm either normal, pessimistic, sadistic, or optimistic. Which would I be? Normal, pessimistic? I'm not sadistic. I don't think I'm a pessimist at all. I'll just say normal. BMI, body mass index. Oh, shit, I don't know what that is. Oh, wait, there's a body mass index calculator at the bottom of the website here at the bottom of the page. The lethal danger of being fat, excess weight has a dramatic impact on one's health. The BMI, body mass index, is a way to measure your disease risk based on your height to weight ratio. Jesus, I'm afraid to touch this. All right, I'm not telling you my weight, but I'll put it in here. Check your BMI. Your category is prone to health risks. Your BMI is 28. Shit. Okay. 28. Smoking status, non-smoker. Okay, those are the criteria. I'm a little fluffy. Just a little fluffy. That's all right. Happens. I've been meaning to hit the tennis court more. 28's not that bad, is it? Check your death clock. Click. Oh, wow. It gives me my personal day of death. It predicts my death. And there's a tombstone that arrives. It says, RIP. Your personal day of death is Wednesday, January 22nd, 2042. I am crap at math. How many years would that give me? All right, let me grab my phone calculator here. Let's see. 2042 minus 2018 is, I have 24 years to live. So I'll die at 74. Is that right? And it actually gives me the number of seconds I have left. My friends, I have 753,540,077 seconds to live. 73 seconds. 70 seconds. 67 seconds. Just counting down right in front of me. Deathclock.com. I have some funny observations about death that you may enjoy, but first let's head over to the switchboard and begin hearing from our callers. I've got Marcus on the switchboard. Marcus, you're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. What's up?
Hey, Seth. Not much. Just wanted to share my thoughts on death, as you said.
It's kind of a dark subject. I mean, are you afraid of death?
I will say I sort of had an existential crisis maybe when I was around 12, 13 years old, because that's when I started to doubt my beliefs. I was still going to church at the time. I was raised Catholic, and there was this period of my life where I was wondering, what if there isn't something after death, and what is it like? And I just kind of imagined just an eternal darkness, and it really scared me for quite some time. But I think doing some more research into it, and realizing that when your brain shuts down and your body just ceases to exist, there's just it's kind of like what I was before I was born, and there's not much to be afraid of if there's nothing to experience. So I come to accept that.
12 years old, that's kind of a heavy trip for you to take at that age, man. Or probably at any age, but
oh, yeah.
Here's an odd question. I'll just toss this out. And someone had thrown this out the other day, and we were just hanging out with some buddies. And they said, all right, look, if reincarnation was real, right? You die and you come back as something else, you start over, and it's an endless cycle. If you're to be reincarnated, Marcus, what would you want to come back as? That's a tough one, isn't it? That's what everybody in the room did. We were all like, I mean, my first thought was something funny, like, a duck-billed platypus, just because, they just make me laugh.
Yeah.
Then I'm thinking, well, there's something that lives a long time and that's not going to be hunted for its tusks or something like that. No, maybe that wouldn't work. Can it be an inanimate object? We had all of these. We got really serious about it. Like, if you could come back as anything, what would you come back as? I don't know. Does anything pop into your skull?
I will say the first thing that comes to mind is something my girlfriend always told me. And it's kind of funny because I kind of agree with her suggestion. She said, because she's not religious either, but she said, like, she would be open to the idea of reincarnation if that were a thing. And she always told me that if she were to come back, she would come back as a well-cared-for cat. Because she knows how she takes care of her cat, and she knows she basically lives an extremely fulfilling and happy life.
A well-cared-for cat, just, sleep 16 hours a day and lie on the couch and
that's something I'd be down for.
Eat your vittles and, get scratches behind the ear. Yeah, it's not bad. Like if you come back as a human, then you have to, be born and you have to learn how to walk and talk and do all that other stuff again. And so I'm like, well, that's a lot of work. Cat's born, you got the instinct. You're already kind of doing cat stuff, right?
Yeah, they're quite self-sufficient. I think I'd want that.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad. We'll see what the comment section has to say about it. It's a very profound, Marcus. Very profound. How you doing these days when you think about the fact that we live mortal lives? I mean, you cool with it? Have you come to terms with it?
Yeah, totally. And, there's this song I listened to that, like, really reflected my beliefs on it. Even though I'm not at that stage of my life yet. John Mayer, he has this song, Stop This Train. And if you listen to the song, like, so he does use a lot of metaphors, but you see that this, the chorus, he's talking about, stop this train. He wants to stop and go back home again. So it's kind of like he realizes that life is accelerating forward at a pace that's kind of scary for him. And he realizes that, he can't stop the flow of time. He can't go back. He knows one day he's going to lose his parents, and he has to deal with the song is basically coming to terms with his mortality. And I listened to that song a lot at first because it really resonated with me, and I think that's how I feel now. So I'm not afraid of death. I feel like it gives my life more meaning, and I just hope that the dying part isn't so bad.
Yeah, I hope it's quick, like quietly in my sleep, or maybe
not screaming like your passengers.
At least don't let me see it coming, right? Yeah, that kind of thing. So, I heard it said a long time ago by somebody, and it was just a funny observation, but he said, life is like a roll of toilet paper. He said it spins faster and faster as you get closer to the end. And I've never forgotten that, because time does go faster as I age. It used to be when I was a teenager, a year seemed like a decade. Everything just passed so slowly, and I was waiting all the time. And now I just blink and it's, whoa, wait, it's almost April. Wait, whoa, hang on, it's almost summertime. And, time is just moving more quickly. It's interesting. It's an observation. I have one other observation for you, Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
Marcus is a great cat name. I just want you to, if you do come back as a cat, I've decided Marcus is a great cat name. That's awesome, my friend. Well, thank your girlfriend for setting us this whole, she probably started a whole thread on the comments. So please thank her for us, and thanks for your observations as well. It means a lot, and have a great week, okay?
Oh, definitely. I'll check it out. Thank you very much, Seth.
I saw a list of funny one-liners about death, just submitted by random people. I'll just read a few of them for your and my amusement. About a month before he died, my uncle had his back covered in lard. After that, he went downhill fast. I hope that when I inevitably choke to death on gummy bears, that people just say I was killed by bears and leave it at that. My wife just died of a head injury. You see, she found out I replaced our bed with a trampoline, and she hit the roof. My dad died when we couldn't remember what his blood type was. As he was dying, I remember he kept saying, "Be positive." But it's so hard without him. Why are so many old people reading the Bible? They're cramming for their final. Will the idea of glass coffins be successful? Remains to be seen. Do zombies go swimming in the Dead Sea? I saw someone had posted an old story that goes like this. It says, in life, there are really only two things to worry about, whether you are healthy or whether you are sick. If you're healthy, then there's nothing to worry about. But if you're sick, there are only two things to worry about, whether you will get better or whether you'll die. If you get better, well, there's nothing to worry about. But if you die, you then only have two things to worry about, whether you go to heaven or hell. If you go to heaven, well, there's nothing to worry about. But if you go to hell, you'll be so busy hanging out and enjoying time with old friends that you'll have nothing to worry about. On a more serious note, I really like that quote by Richard Dawkins from his book, Unweaving the Rainbow. Dawkins says, "We are going to die, and that makes us the lucky ones. Most people are never going to die because they are never going to be born. The potential people who could have been here in my place, but who will in fact never see the light of day, outnumber the sand grains of Arabia. Certainly those unborn ghosts include greater poets than Keats, scientists greater than Newton. We know this because the set of possible people allowed by our DNA so massively exceeds the set of actual people. In the teeth of these stupefying odds, it is you and I, in our ordinariness, that are here. We privileged few who won the lottery of birth against all odds. How dare we whine at our inevitable return to that prior state, from which the vast majority have never stirred." Short break. When I come back, we're going to hear from a listener who has a great idea for those who would like kind of a proper send-off when their day comes, and they happen to be a Star Trek fan. We will boldly go into that conversation in just a second. The U.S. Postal Service is an important resource for any business. You think about the world we live in, even now in 2018, home or office, house or corporation. Mail is still a critical part of our lives, but Stamps.com has brought an ease of use, the convenience of printing postage for letters and packages from your own computer and printer, any mail class, 24 hours a day, and the ease of having the post office pick up whatever you need to mail for you. Stamps.com software is so easy. You can download it and use it in just a few short minutes, and the digital scale plugs right into the USB port on your computer. It means you're not overcompensating with wasted postage because you don't want to be short. You can just weigh it and know for sure. No equipment to lease, no long-term commitments. With Stamps.com, send everything from postcards to letters to packages, domestic and international. Just click, print, mail, and you're all done. I've used Stamps.com for years. Business mailings, book shipments, merchandise from the website, gifts and letters, you name it. It's awesome. And right now, you too can enjoy the Stamps.com service. Just use my name, Seth Andrews, to get this special offer. It includes up to $55 in free postage, a digital scale, and a 4-week trial. So don't wait. Go to Stamps.com, and before you do anything else, click on the radio microphone at the top of the homepage and type in Seth Andrews. That's Stamps.com. Enter Seth Andrews. My patrons get a commercial-free version of the show. I love my patrons. I love you. Thank you for the support. Patreon.com/Seth Andrews. You can set up the terms of your support, how much you want to support, for how long. Of course, my sponsors are greatly appreciated, but so are my patrons. Patreon.com/Seth Andrews. We're doing a happy show about death. It's a subject many don't like to talk about, but why is that? Sometimes the understanding, the acknowledging of the temporary nature of these mortal lives can actually spur us to do a better job of actually living, right? And that's the kind of stuff we're talking about today. Life and death. As people who don't believe in heaven or nirvana or reincarnation or any kind of an afterlife, we think this is pretty much it. We get one go around and then probably nothing. Somebody asked me the other day, they're like, how do you feel about turning 50 in a few weeks? And I said, it's better than the alternative, right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I could have either never existed or I could be dead already. I mean, yeah, it's better than the alternative. I'll take it. The glass is half full. It's all about how you look at it, right? We go to the switchboard. I've got Jerry on Skype. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. How are you?
I'm fine, Seth. How are you?
Calling or dialing in from where?
A little town called Gawler in South Australia.
Jerry, do you have any experiences with, people who've sort of had these conversations? Do you have a story for the show or anything?
Well, firstly, although I'm in Australia, I'm actually Irish, and we immigrated here in the 70s. And just to give you a little bit, I was brought up Irish Catholic. And what we used to do is see a black wreath on the door of a house, and you would actually go in and say a prayer over the top of a dead person, even if you didn't know them. So I probably saw 200 or 300 open casket deaths in my life before I was leaving there at 15.
Is that Irish tradition, a black wreath on the door?
It was a black wreath on the door. That way you knew there was a death actually happening there, and it was very standard. Actually, my first childhood memory is of a death. Unfortunately, my cousin got killed at 2 years old in a place where there were hardly any cars. And my cousins were roughly the same time as me. So she was in a little white casket, and she was in the parlor. And my cousins and I were all around 5 or 6 at the time, and her eyes slowly opened during the day. Now, you can imagine in a superstitious country like Ireland, where there's lots of ghost stories, pagans, banshees, everything, leprechauns, whatever, it scared the bejesus out of us all day as we were thinking that she would rise from her coffin. So that's my first real childhood memory. But death is part of life, and as we go through, open coffins over here don't happen very often. We don't have the same kind of situation that you do in America where you actually preserve everybody and put them in the ground. So death is very much part of my life because of my Irishness. If you don't preserve them and then bury them, what do you do with them? We just put them in the coffin and put them in the ground, or we burn them. In fact, there's a rising tide in Australia where there's the green burial, where they wrap you in cloth and put you in the ground, and there you go.
I kind of like the sound of that. I always thought embalming fluid was kind of like an unnecessary step.
It's a toxic thing, too. It's bad for the environment.
Yeah. Just fertilize a tree with me or something, right?
That's what I want. And I've had this discussion with my kids, and they actually make fun of me along the way about Mum's going to grow a tree when she dies, all those kind of things.
Have you ever lost anyone close to you?
There was one friend in particular that you may be interested in. She was an atheist, and unfortunately she had bowel cancer, and she died in her 40s, which is an unfortunate thing. However, she was a really big geek. And she never, ever wanted to be buried in a church. And there were 2 services, if you want to put it that way, or 2 commemorations for her. Because her parents lived in interstate in Victoria instead of South Australia, she went over there to a hospice to be with her family before she died. So my friend from here, who occasionally runs secular funerals, went over to the family and ran the service for her at the time. And bright blue, a royal blue, is her favorite color. So the family arranged, and they're actually very religious people, but her family arranged for her coffin to be bright, luminescent royal blue. And on either side of her coffin were 2 life-size cardboard figures of Spike from Buffy and Quark from Star Trek DS9. She was a bit of a messy person. So on top of her coffin was strewn rubbish. And the service was carried out with all of this spectacular display up the front. And as they were taking the coffin out, they played Star Trekking Across the Universe as her final song, as the coffin was actually taken out of that home.
All right, hang on. All right, she's a big Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan. And
Yep.
You had a character from Buffy and from DS9 around the casket.
around the casket. So you know where you can get those life-size, at video stores or
Cardboard cutout things. Yeah.
Yep. So Spike and Quark were actually present at her funeral.
And you had rubbish, as in
rubbish, because she's a messy person. So
you just threw shit all over the casket.
We call them coffins over here.
A coffin.
Yes.
Okay.
And then as they took the coffin away, it was Star Trekking across the universe. And that was her funeral service in her home with her parents, who are, as I say, extremely religious.
The family's devoutly religious. They were okay with all this?
Sure. Well, they were the ones that helped arrange everything. The thing about Australia, Seth, it's not like America, is really nobody cares that much what you are. It's about the celebration of the person and what they want, not necessarily what the others want. And she had always spoken throughout her life that she was an atheist, that she didn't want to do anything that was anyway religious or theistic in tone if she died. And particularly she had talked about it for the years before, because she knew that she only had 5 or 6 years left.
What a fond memory. I mean, if you're going to have a funeral or memorial service, to be able to make people smile and connect them with all these different sort of pop culture references and talk about the things that she loved and have those as part of her memorial. I love it. I love the idea.
Well, that's only the first part. The second part of the memorial is because you've been to Australia, so you know that we're pretty big. It's a big country. So Victoria is miles away. It takes anything from 10 hours to drive from Adelaide to Melbourne. And because of that, her friends in South Australia, where she in fact lived most of her life, decided also to do a memorial service for her as well. So we had friends who had a hall and a whole pile of stuff. And what we actually decided to do was celebrate her life through these things. Once again, there was the Buffy and the Star Trek references. And we had decided that in honor of the Buffy aspect of her interest, we would have gravestones, basically. We made them up. We put significant events in her life: when she was born, when she died, when she graduated from university, when she started work, when she went to her first convention, the first time she met Spike, all of those kind of things. And we had those placed all around the hall that we actually were using for the day. We also got a lot of people in there. We put on one of her favorite DS9 episodes, and we all sat and watched it.
Wait, now is the body in the room at the time?
No.
Okay,
This is purely a memorial service for those that are 1,000 miles away from where the funeral service was actually held. So we all sat down and watched this DS9 episode, and after that actually happened, we decided we'd made up, artificial, of course, because it didn't have her remains. But one of the aspects of the culture of the Ferengi is that at the end of a funeral, you sell their desiccated remains to make money for the family. So we decided to make up little boxes with her symbol on it and her name on it. And then we sold these pretend desiccated remains, which was fizz, if you know what fizz is. That sort of fizzy powder that you put in your mouth and explodes into sugar.
Okay.
And we actually auctioned those off for charity. And she was also an avid collector of autographs, but she had her name on them, so they weren't useful anymore, like Therese, her name was. And so we also auctioned those off as well, with the idea that if we auctioned off and made some money out of them, we could raise some money for the hospice that she actually used before her death. So we were able to buy them some furniture so that they could provide a better service for the people away. We raised about $500 or $600.
You do more than some conventions for this funeral. I'm monumentally impressed. I was impressed with Australia to begin with. If I didn't live in the United States, trust me, you guys would be stuck with me. I would come down there and I would let you teach me to drive on the other side of the road, and I would be drinking your coffee every day. And I just met nothing but amazing, beautiful people. I've just fallen in love with Australia. But now, after hearing this story, I have even more reason to think so.
But there is one thing more. If you actually remember, and I know you're a Trekkie over the years, we decided at the end of it to finish the day was to get together in a big circle. So there's about 30 or 40 people in this circle, and we did a Klingon death howl to commemorate her off. So we all stood there, arms around each other in this circle, and we all howled to the sky to finally send her off. When people die, the Klingons all stick their head and they howl like wolves. So we stood there for about 30 seconds howling like wolves. That was her final goodbye.
That is, I'm going to, hang on, I need to put this in my well here. I need a Klingon death bellow at the end. I'd like all my friends and neighbors, everyone do the Klingon. All right, now I have that on my list. That's on my to-do list when my day comes. Jerry, you're a joy to talk to. Thanks for sharing a wonderful and appropriately colorful story. And I think there's a lesson there, right? Make your passing kind of about you and your life, the things you loved, make it a memory, and try to make people smile because we need as many of those as we can get, right?
That's absolutely right. And celebrate the person in the way they want to be celebrated, not the way you want them to be celebrated.
Fantastic, Jerry. Thank you so very much. Great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you too.
All right, hang on. Jerry's got me thinking about it here. Look it up on YouTube. Klingon death howl. All right, let's just get a sense of what Jerry was talking about. The Klingon death howl. Oh, yeah, that's a fantastic way to send off grandma or whatever. Just gather around the coffin and just let it out, man. Klingon death howl. I've got Deanna on the switchboard. Thanks for being a part of the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well. I hope you are.
What are your thoughts?
I'm a veterinarian and I have experience with euthanizing animals.
Oh, I don't think I could. My heart couldn't take it, Deanna.
Well, really, the way I look at it, it's usually needed. These are animals that are at the end of their life from a terminal illness or a chronic illness that can't be managed anymore. And I look at it as an opportunity to end their suffering in a positive, peaceful way.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, we were talking the other day about the death with dignity arguments and how we often allow our animals to die with greater dignity than we do human beings because we have a stigma about the right to die and the right for people to be able to sort of go out on their own terms without pain and suffering. And so many want to leave it in God's hands. But when it comes to our animals, we'll intervene almost right away, right?
Exactly. And to me, it's not something that I necessarily enjoy doing, but I consider it's something that I'm good at being compassionate in that situation. And I feel it almost an honor to be able to help a client through that and to help a dog or a cat through that.
Natalie and I have had the conversation about our dogs. Like, I need my dogs to live forever, Deanna. Like, I need you to come up with a potion or some kind of a miracle cure. I need something. We were talking about the fact that we know the day is going to come, hopefully in many, many years, but we know the day is going to come. And then when you go through the heartbreak, you think, never again. Like, I'm sure you've seen this. Like, I can't do this again. But then once you've sort of gone through that and you still have love to give, you still have a place in your life to be able to start again, many people will bring another pet into their homes and their heart is filled all over again.
And it's always worth it, especially in the situation where you rescue an animal, like Henry, or some of my dogs are rescues. Yeah.
I will never buy another animal again. Like, I'll always go to the pound or a rescue or something. There's so many suffering animals in this world, and I want to rescue them all. Do you ever feel that way?
I do. Yes. Well, I say it's an occupational hazard at work because every single one of us has rescued an animal. A patient that has been surrendered or, one that we have found. I have 5.
You have 5 what?
I have 3 dogs and 2 cats.
And you'd probably take more if you could, right?
I absolutely would.
I'm the same way. I totally get it. I want to rescue the whole world, Deanna. But from your perspective, death is just part of the cycle, and you are helping to ease suffering, and hopefully the animal has had a good life surrounded with love, huh?
Well, yes, it is. It's just part of the cycle, and oftentimes we'll bring them into people into a quiet room, and we'll give the pet a special treat. I've given dogs a piece of chocolate cake. Things they can't normally have in health. And as they're getting ready to die, then, they can enjoy that last little treat. it wouldn't be a bad way to die. I mean, I would like to have a piece of chocolate cake before I die.
Yeah, I think I would too. I'll take a piece of carrot cake or maybe some frozen custard with some chocolate and peanut butter. Yeah. Well, it's weird. It's kind of a somber topic, but it's also like, I can find myself nodding like, yeah, if the animal's going to go, let's go out with something sweet on the tongue and touch and being surrounded by our family and without pain. And I totally get it. Deanna, thanks for the work that you do as a veterinarian. I'm sure you've seen a lot in your lifetime, but your work makes a difference. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
On the switchboard, I have Will. Will, you're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you, Seth?
Doing a happy show about death, which seems to many an oxymoron. So, I don't know, we're approaching kind of a dark subject for many. What's your perspective on all this, Will?
Well, my perspective is I work as a paramedic firefighter, and I have seen probably more than my share of death. And so it's interesting just comparing the variety of people's experiences from a sometimes impartial perspective.
I would think, though, in your job, you're not looking at someone who passed away at the age of 90 in their sleep with a smile on their face, right? I mean, you see trauma, accidents, calamity of all kind, right?
I've seen the gamut. I've been called to a 95-year-old great-grandma who passed away in her sleep, incredibly peaceful. I've seen deaths of incredible violence and just about everything in between. So it does sometimes happen that way.
What does this do to your own perceptions and opinions about death? Do you become jaded to it?
Yes and no. I always tell my classes when I'm teaching a class of new medics, I always tell them on day one that if no death bothers them at all, then this probably isn't the gig for them. And conversely, if every death destroys them, then again, this might not be the gig for them. And I've had it both ways. I've had deaths that were monumentally Darwinian and didn't.
Forgive me for laughing, Will, but I mean, so like a Darwin Award, you mean somebody does something monumentally stupid and pays the ultimate price kind of thing?
Yes.
Come on, Will. I mean, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but as you guys are working the scene, are you guys looking at each other going, oh my God, this guy constructed a parachute out of his grandma's curtains? And, do you guys have that wink going on between you? Like, holy shit, the gene pool just improved a little bit.
Yes, that absolutely does happen. We always keep it professional. When the public is there, when the relatives are there, and it does help to have your, procedures and your protocols, ingrained in you, because there you've got your game face on and we're doing our thing. But then afterward, when all is said and done and we're back at the house, that's when, you can start to unwind a little bit and you have that reaction. You say, I can't believe that what we just saw really happened.
I'm just trying to picture the call. You guys get on the radio and you're like, all right, we have a gentleman here dressed in a clown suit who was texting and walked into an open manhole. I mean, I just feel like it would be hard to keep a straight face.
It is. It is. I mean, it can be hard.
All right. And then conversely, on the other side of the spectrum, you probably see the domestic abuse, the death of children, all that unspeakable stuff, right?
I've had a call many years ago that required me to take a week off of work just to get my head back in the right place again afterwards. And it's, and that's part of the uniform.
How much of what you do when you're teaching is countering the stuff people learn about firefighting on Rescue 911 or, on television, the kind of action adventure firefighter narrative out there?
Oh, goodness. If I had a nickel for every time that someone put up their hand and said, hey, I saw this on Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah. I mean, when do we get to go out sirens blaring and go up the ladder and the skyscraper's on fire and we get to rescue the babes? And, I just wonder if you have to go up against that,
Oh, yeah. Usually, several times per class. They say, I saw this on TV. I said, well, You know, they've used that exact same plot device in Grey's Anatomy. And if you're of a certain age, they used it in ER. And if you're of another certain age, they used it in Emergency. So you get used to the plot lines that make really good TV, but are one in a million medical calls as well.
You mentioned Emergency, and you just gave away your age, just like me. I almost brought it up, but I thought, nah, nobody's going to know Emergency. But,
Gage and DeSoto, Seth. Gage and DeSoto.
We watched it religiously. Will, I mean, how does all of this in your job and your life, from your experiences and perspective, I mean, do you approach life differently, seeing life and death in this way?
Yeah, you know what? I've made my peace with the fact that I'm never going to see everything I want to see, and I'm never going to do everything I want to do. But I certainly try to knock things off the bucket list. And you know what? When I have patients with me, and invariably the question comes up, they say, "Am I going to die?" Depending on the situation, and it's my answer is always context dependent. It kind of depends really how truly serious the situation is. And, you know, how much of a sense of humor I think they've got, and whether the situation is appropriate. So, you know, I've got the standard spiel that's, you know, drilled into everyone's head in school. But if I think that the situation is appropriate, I'll tell them, well, you know, everyone's gonna die eventually, but you're not gonna die today because not on my shift, because the paperwork is just atrocious.
And you make them laugh, you get some levity going, you break the tension a little bit.
You know what? That's if a patient's condition can be alleviated somewhat by cracking a joke and just bringing their blood pressure down 10 points without doing anything fancy or heroic, then I'm all about that.
Well, I was telling Natalie the other day, I said, you know, if I'm ever in an accident of some kind, you know how I will know I'm totally screwed? Someone's going to look at me and say, everything's going to be all right. If you watch TV or the movies, you know, you don't have any legs, right, after the mortar went off, but you're going to be fine. If somebody in an accident tells me I'm going to be fine, that's when I know I'm pretty much screwed. I don't know why that stuck in my head, but it just did.
No, you're right, Seth. I mean, I've seen that at least on 2 TV shows. The names escape me, but I know exactly what you're talking about. And if I can ask you a question, I don't know if it's like, I'm calling from Canada. I don't know if it's a big thing down in the States, but do you folks have this enormous funeral procession being led by the hearse that goes from the funeral home to the cemetery at, you know, 20 miles an hour and extends for a mile? Is that a thing down in the States?
It's a thing. In fact, we just had a family funeral a few weeks back, and it was the same deal. You know, they have the memorial service, open casket in that case, and then they load the casket up in the hearse, and then everybody turns their headlights on. The hearse leads, and then there's a string of however many cars, you know, often stretching up to a mile, depending on who passed away, you know. And they all sort of have a police escort to the graveside. Yes, it's very much a thing here in the U.S.
Having seen and been around this for a long time, I've got a couple of questions about that. I mean, question one would be, isn't this profoundly arrogant that the living have to, you know, pause their day to allow for the dead to go from A to B? And I guess my second question would be, if heaven is all about peace and love and being with Grandpa again, why does everyone mourn?
Both are good questions. I think, though, the power of ritual really resonates with some, especially the grieving. For them, you know, going to the ceremony and having the music and seeing the photographs and sharing the stories and then getting and seeing the dead laid in the ground. For them, I hate the word closure, Will. I hate it. But the ritual portion of it gives them a way through. And I think that might have merit. I also get why you might feel sadness and grief. I mean, a loss, even a temporary loss, if you believe you're going to be reunited, it still means that you won't see your loved one from day to day on this earth. You feel a disconnect. It'd be like if someone had moved to the other side of the world and you weren't going to see them for the rest of your life. You would feel a sense of loss. There's some of that. But I do find it interesting that so many who are religious, who believe in heaven, like a beautiful, perfect place where we live forever with everyone we love, Those are so often the people I find who are terrified of dying. They're the ones who wring their hands over whether or not their insurance policy is going to cover this and who's wearing their seatbelt and do I have my handgun loaded? And they're just terrified. And I'm thinking, if you believe heaven is amazing beyond measure, you'd be thinking, come on, if a satellite falls on me, it's been a good day.
Yeah, I think your point about the importance of ceremony as quote unquote closure, I think that's a solid idea. It just always struck me as odd. And if I can share, my mom is, she's approaching the end of her life. And so we're starting to have, the talk. And a lot of these topics are coming up. And it was kind of funny. A few months ago, we were chatting about it. And I forget exactly what we were talking about. But my mom turns around and she just starts giving me shit for talking to her like I'd be talking to a patient. I guess I'd lapsed into the textbook discussion of, loss and ceremony and ritual.
You got into caregiver mode and she busted you on that, huh?
I totally did. And she was a nurse for 35 years, so she knows that mode well.
Well, is she lucid? It sounds like she's pretty sharp even at this stage.
You know what? She comes and goes. She's on the mend from a stroke, but she knows that she's on the mend from a stroke. So I have to remind her a few times every now and again that, it's her brain is broken and it's starting to mend and, not to be so hard on herself. But, we have that talk and I tell you, it tends to put things in perspective.
Well, I'm glad she's got you. That's awesome. Thanks for the work you do as a firefighter and a paramedic. I know that it ain't glamorous work, but it is good work. So thanks for talking to me, man. It's been a pleasure.
You keep up the good work, Seth. Thanks a lot.
I had a question or two about those who donate their bodies to science and end up being used as a teaching tool in medical school. And so, as they say in game show terminology, I decided to phone a friend. Her name is Michaelin. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, happy to be here.
You are in medical school. How's that going?
Very busy, but it's good.
Do you have a life at all? No?
Well, no.
I already answered the question for you, I guess. I wanted to talk about what happens if we donate our bodies to science, which is something that many people have said they've wanted to do. And I talked about it myself. When Natalie went to school, she's not a physician, but she's in a medical related field. And they had to take a cadaver class, which I guess is where some people land if they donate their body to science. You end up on the slab in a university somewhere. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you describe this class for me? You're not betraying any sort of a confidence or anything, are you? I know you can't talk about it when you're in school.
It's okay to talk about it, yeah.
Describe the kind of thing that happens in there. They wheel the bodies in. It's got to stink, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's a smell I will never forget.
A smell of what?
Mostly formaldehyde and the chemicals that they use to preserve the bodies.
Like I've heard that you can tell when the cadaver classes begin in the rest of the building because people know by smell the bodies are here somewhere in one of the rooms.
Yes, they're stored in these metal tanks. It's like a big metal rectangle, and they are filled with these chemicals in the bottom of them, so they're sort of wet. And then when you open the tank, you sort of lift this thing and the platform raises up and then the liquid drains down.
Do the bodies start wet then? They're still damp from the liquidy stuff?
Yeah, there's a lot of fluid involved with them.
Okay, so do they have you all doing the same thing?
So the medical students, what we did, I think we had somewhere around 30 cadavers in our lab. And so, day one, we walk into the lab and they have us, we have prepped, we've read, Grant's dissector, and it sort of walks us through the steps of okay, you're going to take the scalpel and you're going to cut here and you're going to look for this thing. And so, yeah, our school sorted by organ system. By the way we learn, other schools are different. So we started, with the thorax. And so it was surreal, but they also put a lot of emphasis on, being respectful of the donors. And I don't know, sort of something you don't think of is like when you're cutting in and you're sort of getting you're getting rid of a lot of fat tissue and things to get to the organs. They have blue bins assigned to each cadaver tank so that you're keeping all of the tissues from one cadaver together, because they said some families will, after the year is done, after the course is over, get the bodies back and they'll have them cremated.
So they want to make sure they have all of the, gosh, I hate to use the word pieces, but.
Yes, and so it was important to keep them separated. So all the bins and the tanks are labeled by number. And the only thing that they really tell us about our donors are, we don't get names or anything, but we're given the age and then their official cause of death.
Any student walk in and just immediately say they want to turn around and walk back out?
No, I think everybody stuck with it, as far as I know. As far as nobody walked out because of the anatomy lab.
Did you find yourself having that conversation? This is a dead body. I mean, we, especially in the United States, we don't deal very well with the dead. I'm reminded of when news organizations would post a story about violent crime. They'll show a wounded body, but they won't show a dead one. There's sort of a cultural taboo about dead bodies. Did you find yourself in your own mind thinking, this is so odd, so surreal, that kind of thing?
Yes, absolutely. So this was the first time I'd ever had a full dead body in front of me. So it was very surreal. And the first thing they really had us do was, put on our gloves and just touch the cadaver to kind of get used to that moment. You get used to it. It is a weird thing to have to get used to. And, so sort of making the first contact, just like putting your hand on a shoulder or something and then making the first cut really did feel weird. And like I said, we tried to, keep a sort of air of respect about it. And I think there's a lot of gratitude that we feel toward these individuals who have, donated their bodies so that we can learn about human anatomy in a way that possible. Otherwise, you can read about it all you want, but I had never really done anything like this. So absolutely, it took some getting used to.
I know this sounds like a leading question, but did you, in these examinations, find yourself awestruck by the machine of the body, how it all works together?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's insane how our bodies work. And the more I learn in school, it's just like, it's crazy that they actually, on average, function at all. There's so many little intricate pieces. And, the thing that was really interesting to me was that everybody is so different. And we would learn in textbooks like, this blood vessel is supposed to be over here. And usually there's 3 branches coming off on the right side. And, you get into a body and you're like, actually, no, there's not just these 3 branches coming off. Like some have 2 and some have 1 going the other way. And it actually was very difficult, especially when we had exams, to be able to really name and label and know everything that's going on, because everybody is just so different.
Michael, and if I donate my body to science, and I'm seriously considering it, I mean, I'm shy. Can you put some tennis shorts on me? I mean, I'm good with the whole dip me in formaldehyde and throw me in the metal box, and y'all can poke at me. But, can you put me like not a Speedo, but you know what I'm saying? I mean, were they totally naked?
They were. They were completely naked. However, at times when we didn't need to see those parts, genitals and faces were covered with cloths. I think more for us.
Oh, for you guys, yeah. I think it was probably more for you.
Well, as far as covering the faces, I mean, it's just... Yeah.
I might be able to do that. If y'all just keep that sheet handy and just work where you need to work and whatnot. But this is part of how we educate people as to how the human body works. It's interesting. It wasn't all that long ago when people used to steal the bodies from grave sites for the purpose of study. It was so taboo. And of course, now we have people who volunteer themselves to, after death, help to educate others about the machine of the human body. Last thing, any anecdotes, funny stories, anything weird or wacky happen in there where you guys were, doing your thing?
I think so. we were able to get into the lab at any time. There's a code on the door that the students who are in the anatomy course have. And so if at any point we wanted to go in and go study to try to memorize all the things for our exams, we could go in and do that. So I went in with just two friends in the evening time at one time. And so we're in this dark lab that smells awful and it's full of bodies, by ourselves. And one of the weirdest things is that some of them have pacemakers in them, and over time their batteries die. And so then they start beeping because their batteries are dying. And so we were just in, the silent lab, and we're looking in one of the tanks, and all of a sudden across the lab, you're hearing this beeping, and it's just very startling, kind of a scary movie moment.
Thank you for not telling me that the pacemaker charged the heart and the body jolted. Thank you for not telling me that.
Oh my God.
I would
that would
never
have been
sleep
so much worse.
again. I was bracing myself for the ending of the story, thankful for the fact that it was relatively benign. Michaelin, congratulations on your pursuit of the degree and for just helping to be a part of real world science. We find that people in the medical field so often do all of the heavy lifting, and then whenever the work is done or the work is happening, people are rubbing their crucifixes and looking up to the heavens and thanking a deity somewhere. But you are working as we speak to be a part of the solution. I hope it's over quickly for you, and then I hope all your efforts pay off, and we'll celebrate with you, okay?
Thank you so much.
I've got William on the switchboard. William, you're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. How's it going?
It's going much better now.
Much better than when?
When I was depending upon the mysterious guy in the sky to take care of life problems for me.
Well, how long that last?
I was a believer since I was, I would say, 18 years old in Christianity. I started off in charismatic Catholic, became a Pentecostal, and then moved away from that hooey-gooey stuff that they were doing. Because it just didn't make sense to me.
Well, hang on. William, what's a charismatic Catholic?
It's a Catholic that believes in the movement of the Holy Spirit and the gifts, according to Corinthians and a couple other places in the Scripture.
Catholics who believe in the manifestation of the Holy Ghost and speaking in tongues, that kind of thing?
Yes, that's correct. And that was a movement in the, I would say, the late 70s. Yeah, late 70s.
Man, I'd never heard of that one. I'm trying to mesh in my brain Catholicism and speaking in tongues, man.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a mixture of the mystic with the magical mystery tour.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, Mom took us to a little country Pentecostal church in a town called Catoosa, Oklahoma. And Reverend Billy Wheeler was there. And it was the first time I remember hearing someone who was speaking in tongues. And as a kid, it frightened me. Like this lady in the back just started wailing, and it was a babbling, foreign type of sound, and everything else in the room stopped. I think she cut off the sermon, like he was preaching, and she just started screaming, and it gave me goosebumps. And Mom had to console us. She's like, "This is okay. This is in the Bible." And of course, I'm like, "What the hell's going on?" So, but you walked away. You said, "This is all a bunch of hooey."
Oh yeah, I was a
not just hooey. This is all hooey gooey. Is what this is.
It's just very strange. Yeah, I was in Bible college back in my 20s and became a youth pastor. And my wife and I at the time were youth ministers for several years at several different churches. And they all turned out to be a more or less bad experience for both of us. And so we decided to practice our faith pretty much on our own. And then I went back to Bible college over the internet through a program that John MacArthur out of California has. And so I became a very basic fundamentalist, no gifts of the Holy Spirit manifestation, and was quite adamant about it up until it started changing for me overtly when we discovered that my wife had undetected cancer, which she passed away from 7 months after we got the diagnosis. 2 years ago, she passed away. And the thing that struck me more than anything else is this was the better part of my life. My wife and I were together for 39 years, married 38 of those years. We served and worked together and then kind of walked away from the churchianity stuff. But we continued serving the Lord, supposedly. This is what we were thinking at the time. And then for her to wind up with this for no reason at 58, 59 years old and then dying, it just didn't make sense to me that there was some kind of loving God that we were serving that would allow this to happen to her of all people, and then, of course, by extension to me also. So that is what really galvanized the process for me for leaving this bunk behind.
Were you praying? Were you praying to God, please save her?
Yes.
And so when the prayer's not answered and the people around you see that you walked away, a skeptic of prayer or a non-believer in prayer, you're like, God wasn't there for me. What's everybody else around you? What's their take? That, God works in mysterious ways kind of thing? Or?
Yeah, that's exactly what we don't know the whole picture, what God's plan is, all that kind of stuff. I was still quite in shock as well as going through the grieving process. And one of the things that really struck me is that I only had a few, what I would call really good friends that were Christian, quote unquote, that came to any kind of help to me when I was in my grieving process. It's an amazing situation when your sons and your sisters and your quote unquote brothers in the Lord don't really know how to handle this situation. The platitudes are there, but then it ends pretty quickly, and they expect you to get on with your life as though you still had some kind of hope and future, and that you'd eventually reunite with your lost love.
William, is it like they're throwing the platitudes over the fence, like, a hashtag, I'll pray for you, and then they just disconnect and go on with their day kind of thing? Or?
Oh, yeah, and it's, the whole thing of, well, anything that you need, just let us know. We're there for you. But when you tell them what you need, they're not there. This put me into more of a tailspin than anything. It drove me into bankruptcy to the point where I don't have any money or a way to make a living or anything like that. And so without the government coming in and helping out with Social Security and stuff like that, I would have nothing. I would be basically homeless at this point. So,
Natalie's brother has cancer, and even if you're insured in this country, right? Even if you have good insurance in this country, there's a likelihood that it will bankrupt you. I mean, it's not just devastating emotionally and physically, but financially. My heart just goes out to you, man.
You know what? It is what it is. And coming to that realization and the acceptance that there's nobody there really as far as this unseen wizard. You have to rely on people that are really your friends that you find out, and rely on your own determination to carry on and to see the good in this life and the value in your own life, and go out and produce again. And finding that is a long process. We're not trained that way in this country to understand how death works and how it will impact you if you're not prepared for it.
William, you don't have to do this, but, paint a picture for me. Well, what was your wife like?
She was a little short fireball Irish heritage gal who, when she came into the room, would light up the room with her personality and her excitement and her verve for life, her desire for life. She was the best part of me, let me put it that way. If I hadn't met her, I probably would have not achieved as much as I have achieved in my life. Her personality, her excitement, her love, and her kindness and her determination to have things go well for us. And I have a tendency to be more of the melancholy type, and she really was the one that brought me out of that, and just by being with her and being around her. And I'll never forget how much she cared about me. She probably cared about me more than I cared about her, actually, in the long run range of things.
Did she have sort of a conversation with you about, I mean, again, don't you decide the comfort zone, but I mean, as far as God and heaven and an afterlife, did this come up here as she was navigating through cancer?
Yeah, it did come up. And that was a galvanizing aspect of my walking away from the, you won't be able to put this on the radio, but the bullshit.
Yeah, I can. Just say it. The bullshit. Yeah, I knew it was coming. Yeah. Just let it out, man.
The bullshit of the whole thing. And she would always remind me of what my dad had instilled in me before he passed away. And that was that you question everything, no matter who it comes from, especially authority, because they have an agenda. And so she would question the veracity of a lot of the scriptures that I was indoctrinated into taking for granted as truth. And so she was an interesting person in that way. She believed in a higher power. She believed that the best part of Christianity is what we should adhere to morally. But there was many times that she questioned, I would say, the disconnect between what a lot of scriptures say and other scriptures say in the Bible. So,
sounds like she made you a better skeptic.
Oh yeah, she definitely made me have to think instead of just putting my brain on hold.
Well, I'd like to think that she's with you even today. Her memory lives on in you, my friend. Are you doing all right? I mean, I know it's been 2 years, but that's not very long. You doing okay?
I am now, and I have to say that if it hadn't been for my one skeptic friend, who is a young lady that lives up in Colorado, that I probably wouldn't be doing okay. It was because of her that I was able to walk through some of this grieving process, and her encouragement into continue my skepticism and start thinking with my whole brain instead of just one part of my brain. I owe a lot to her in getting through this time. She's a wonderful person and is probably the most moral person I know other than my wife. And her morals don't come from Christianity or any kind of a religious background, because she is not that and never has been that. She's just a really fine human being, and that's what has probably woke me up more than anything else. Besides the passing of my wife, Mia has been the catalyst for me to change the way I look at things and continue on in that path of being encouraged. And now that I've come across your podcasts and your YouTube videos and stuff, that's been an amazing awakening for me and encouragement to me that I'm not crazy.
You're not crazy.
I probably was crazy before.
And you're not alone. You're not in this thing by yourself. And I think, I don't want to put words in your wife's mouth, but I would think that she would wish the best for you and all happiness and the pursuit of the truth on your terms. And I wish the same as well for you.
One of the last things that my gal said to me before her passing was that she was concerned for me that I would be awash in loneliness because of not having her, and because of all the questions that I was coming up with and had all the time. And she was really concerned about that. And I told her not to worry about that, that somehow I would be all right, that the life force that she had and that was still within me would help me carry through this whole thing. And that's basically what's happened.
I appreciate you sort of sharing your journey with us. And honestly, thanks for introducing us in this way to her. She encourages me, So
yeah, she's that way.
William, I appreciate you, my friend, and I'll give you my contact info, and I really do mean it. If there's something I can do for you, you just let me know. All right.
Appreciate it, my friend.
And I'm sitting here thinking out loud. And I hear a lot of stories, so do you, of people who are going through hard times. And we often don't find or create opportunities to help. Our lives are pretty busy and chaotic. Sometimes we need lots of help ourselves, But I listened to William's story. He loses his wife and he's living on a shoestring, government assistance being, the only thing that's really keeping him afloat. And I'm thinking here, what can we do? Could we help this guy a little bit? Wouldn't that feel good? Help a stranger. And the more I think about it, the more I like the idea. Like, what if an audience this big, what if we were to just do something for William? Give the guy a hand, give him a boost, And the more I think about it, the more I think, I like it. Let's do it. I tell you what, by the time this show goes to broadcast, by the time this show posts, I will have in the description box a fundraising link. We'll just set up a page just for William. And let's raise some money just to help the guy. Even if it's a temporary solution, it's a solution. It'll get him by and help make at least this part of his year easier. How much do we raise is a good question. I don't want to set the bar so high that it becomes intimidating, but I don't want to be so low as to not really make any kind of difference. I'm thinking 2, maybe 3. I want to do $3,000. Let's see if we can raise $3,000 for William. And I'll put the GoFundMe, or there's several sites that do this, GoFundMe, and there's like one called YouCare, something like that. They all take a percentage, I know, but they're real easy to use. So I'll set up a page. I'll put the link in there. Go give William a few bucks and let's raise a few grand. And if it goes over 3, keep giving. Let's just see where it takes us. And let's do some humanist stuff, and let's give him some hope and a reason to smile and an encouragement that some people out there have his back. I think that's a fantastic idea. So I will go set up the page. I will put the link in the description box. It should be there by the time you hear this. Click it, give a few dollars, and let's do some good for goodness sake. No gods required. That's going to be awesome. That feels good already. Okay, short break. When I come back, I'm going to talk to a mortician. And we're going to go down into the embalming room, and we're going to... Now, don't leave me. It's going to be all right. It's going to be a positive conversation. But we're going to get into some of what happens after we die. And we're going to finish with a little bit of inspiration to make sure that we climax the show on a high note. Okay? So I will do that. Going to speak to a mortician right after this. Hang on.
Hi, I'm Matt Dillahunty. You may know me from the Atheist Experience call-in show, the Unholy Trinity World Tour with Seth Andrews and Ron Ra, or the many debates, lectures, and educational videos I've shared through my Patreon project at patreon.com/atheistdebates. But what you may not know is that I'm also a magician, and I'm heading out for a world tour using magic to teach skepticism. The first leg of this journey covers Canada, beginning in Victoria on April 1st, with additional stops in Vancouver, Calgary, Winnipeg, Ottawa, Montreal, and ending in Halifax on April 16th. We'll also be touring U.S. cities in May and UK and European cities in June. Dates, showtimes, and ticket information is available at pengburnphilosophy.com, mattdillahunty.com, or at tinyurl.com/skepticmagic. So learn, laugh, and be amazed as Pangburn Philosophy presents Matt Dillahunty's Magic and Skepticism. Bring your friends, let your local secular group know, tinyurl.com/skepticmagic.
Dan Nicholas is... What do I call you, Dan? Do I call you The Undertaker? Well, what's your title? What's on the business card?
Funeral director, embalmer, crematory operator. That is what is on my 3 different licenses I have.
I like Undertaker.
Undertaker's a good word for it.
We're doing a show. I call it a happy show about death. You're a religious person or not, Dan?
I am not. I'm an atheist.
Okay. And you're around death all the time.
I am.
I want to get into some of the... I'm not going to gross anybody out, but I also don't want you to avoid the specific details. There are some things that I want to demystify about death and dying, about the processes, what happens to us after we die, to the body, the physical body.
Sure.
And, more philosophically, I want to talk about you as a guy who's always around dead people. How do you approach death in your own head?
I don't fear it at all, and I haven't feared it in a long time. Death is something everybody experiences. To my knowledge, no one's made it out of life alive. So,
right. Who was my guest? I'm trying to remember who said we all have an expiration date. Right. We don't know what it is, but
that is absolutely true.
So, how do you get into this business? Is it usually a family thing? Hey, dad did it, granddad did it. I guess I'll be a mortician. What?
That is the typical way to do it, yeah. But more and more funeral homes are being bought up by conglomerates. And so more and more it's people who just kind of fall into it. You realize that death doesn't bother you and gore doesn't bother you, and you don't have the patience to go to 8 years of college to be a doctor, and 2 years of college to be a mortician is a hell of a lot easier. Also pays a lot less.
And just catch them on the other end, right? Come on.
That's right.
You've always got a client base.
Exactly.
Is it true that you're part clinician, for lack of a better word? You're dealing with the logistics of preparing the body, but also are you kind of a part counselor? Do you deal with the families, with the grieving?
Yes. Yeah, you do both. We, where I work at our mortuary, we're a family-owned one, and we're kind of full service. So I will do the removals from the place of death. I will sit with the families and set arrangements and what kind of services they're looking for, cremation or burial, and whether or not they want to have a church service or a service at the mortuary or a celebration of life. And then I will also embalm the bodies or cremate the bodies, depending on what the family chooses. So, yeah, there's a little bit of clinical side to it with the bodies and the cremation and the embalming. And then there's the counseling side where you got to kind of work with the grieving family. And if it was one of those sudden deaths or a child death or a young person's death, then usually you got a little bit more grief to deal with there. But, you kind of got to be a jack of all trades.
I've been to a few funerals that were actually led by the funeral director. Perhaps they had no pastor or real family. I guess that's more common than many people realize.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this isn't a jab at you. I'm sure it's not you. But some of these people looked sort of like Lurch from the Addams Family.
Yeah.
They're like, we're gathered here today. They're just sort of, you can tell they're working, they're being respectful, they're being reverent, but you can tell they don't really know the people that they're speaking about. And I always thought, well, that's kind of an odd gig for you to have. You've got to go up and sort of be a comfort mechanism and paint the picture of a person that you may not have really known, right?
It is. It's a strange thing to do, and usually, luckily it doesn't happen terribly often. More often than not, if it does happen, it's usually because a pastor or priest or whoever bails on us at the last moment, and we have to step in.
Because they had a flat tire, or because, screw this, I'm not going to speak at his funeral? Why would somebody bail like that?
Who knows? I've had one priest who bailed on me because he got sick, and so I had to do a graveside for the family. And being an atheist, I'm not as up to date on the Catholic faith as I could be, I suppose. So
he's in a better place today. Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
So,
he's among the angels.
Yeah,
we'll all be together someday. Right?
Exactly.
You fashion the funeral, though, based on the life and the family and the desires of, the bereaved or the last wishes of the deceased. So it's not, you don't platform your own non-belief in God. You've got to be there for the family, doing it their way, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm an atheist and have been for decades, and I don't have any religious alliance. I don't want one, and I don't like people espouting their beliefs. But having said all that, I do this job to help people who are going through the grieving process. I understand that they have their own beliefs that they adhere to, and at that particular moment in time, my beliefs don't matter.
it's them. This whole ceremony is about not the deceased, because trust me, they don't care. It's the family, it's the bereaved, and so we cater to what they want. And sometimes it's very nice, sometimes it's very religious, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you hear some amazingly horrific things. So, people
well,
get
Dan, I mean, I don't want you to betray any professional confidences. You've got a boundary probably, but come on, give me something. What's some of the weirdest shit you've seen out there? I mean, you've seen some stuff, right? Some people said at the funeral, we'd like Bob. Hey, we'd like him to be carted in his favorite chair, and we'd put a football helmet on him or something. Come on, you ever seen anything wacky like that?
I've seen a guy who passed. His brother was the one handling the service. The deceased was the K-State fan. The brother was the KU fan, and he decked out the entire thing in KU regalia. He put number one KU fan stuff inside the casket on the guy's chest. He did all that. So now the guy's buried with all the KU stuff. I had somebody ask me if we could bury him standing upright, so they were vertical. I've had people ask me if we could bury him upside down.
Hang on, hold on.
Yep.
How do you bury somebody upright? Do you have to you have to wrap them in bubble wrap so that they don't bang around in there? How does somebody go in vertically?
You don't. The cemeteries won't do it. They won't do it. The backhoes don't dig that deep, so they won't do it. People ask us to do stuff like that.
And somebody else wanted to be upside down. I'm sorry, keep going. I had to jump in there.
That's all right. Somebody wanted to know if their loved one could be buried face down, which we said we can't do that either. I have no clue. They didn't give us the specifics. They just asked us, and I'm like, no, we can't do that because we can't. If anybody caught us doing that, then that would be a reflection on us. So, I've had people want to watch embalmings of their loved ones, which is something that, we try to discourage because there's a lot of blood and potentially gore. I've had people who have tried to crawl in caskets with their loved one.
Oh, wow.
So
I remember there was someone that I had known just in a cursory way. She'd lost teenage son, and in a moment of real despair, she was at the cemetery and she was literally digging at the gravesite. I mean, the separation had destroyed her emotionally, and it just hurts the heart. And you see a lot of that.
Yes.
Do you have to sort of develop a leathery skin, so to speak? I mean, do you have to put up a wall of defense emotionally so that you're not just distraught all the time?
Yes, you do. I'm married and I have 3 kids, and I have embalmed children and buried children and cremated children that were my kids' age. And, you do this long enough and you will see people who you will see people that look exactly like people you know. And so you have to understand what it is you do, I don't believe in a hereafter, but I do believe in death. And once you're dead, in my view. And so it helps me to build that wall to be able to do what I need to do. Plus, I'm not there to share in the people's grief. I am there to be that rock for them to cling to and to make sure that everything is taken care of and everything goes and the service takes place and everything happens so that they don't have to stress about any of that. It's already hard enough for them. I take care of all that.
I'm going to get a little bit more into sort of the philosophical. I'm going to get back into you and death and the meaning of life and all of this. But I want to kind of get into the nuts and bolts because I've always had a fascination. I guess this is just a warning to our listeners if, this kind of thing might disturb you. We're going to go into the embalming room for just a few minutes here with Dan Nicholas and talk about what actually happens after we die. How is the body prepared? What are the different methods? Kind of what goes on deep down there in that basement? I mean, I've always had this, I've seen TV. I've seen the movies, right?
Right.
But you tell me, I mean, let's say I pass away quietly in my sleep at the age of, 85.
Okay.
What happens to me, Dan? Let's say I want a standard burial in a cemetery. Walk me through it, man.
Okay, well, if you choose to be embalmed, we would take you back to the mortuary. We would undress you and clean you, wash you. We would then raise artery and vein, depending upon what condition your body is in. We would close the mouth and the eyes. There are mechanical devices we use to help with those. We tie the mouth shut so that it doesn't pop open. We glue the eyes shut so that they don't pop open. And then we open the vein to drain blood while we inject embalming fluid into the artery, and we just basically displace as much of the blood as we possibly can with embalming fluid, which usually contains formaldehyde.
Now, what's the purpose of removing the blood? Why not just allow the blood to decompose with the rest of me?
That's something that's very American, believe it or not. The blood is the first thing to decompose in the body. I mean, it is the first to break down. There's very little cellular makeup to the blood, so it's the first to break down. And as it breaks down, it starts to cause everything else to want to break down as well. So if you leave the blood in the body, then what will happen is decomposition will be accelerated at a natural pace. The only things that can kind of slow that down would be either temperature, lowering the temperature, or taking the blood out. And then the formaldehyde helps to kind of encapsulate the cells and replace some of the water in the cells. And then it kind of holds on to the integrity of the cell so that it stays, the tissue stays. It does not.
I mean, is some of that so that the body can be somewhat presentable in time for the funeral 3 to 4 to 5 days later? Is some of that play in?
Exactly. And that's the whole purpose of embalming, is to get rid or slow down the decomposition. It doesn't stop it. It just slows it down, and it allows for a better presentation of the body, because as the body is laying there after death, you're going to have lividity, which is where all your blood drains to the lowest part of your body. If you're on your back, that's your back. If you're on your face, it's your face. As that blood breaks down, it stains the skin. So somebody who died on their side in their sleep, they're going to have half of their face is going to be swollen with blood and stained. Those kinds of things present an unattractive appearance or an unpleasant appearance for loved ones and to see when they go see their, the deceased one who's just passed. So, those kinds of things is what we want to try to prevent. Plus, there's a smell associated with decomposition. Muscles go through rigor and then they release rigor as the decomposition works its way through. When that happens, bowels release, things like that. If there's someone like me who's overweight, we have a lot of gas built up in our stomachs, in our thorax. We'll start to purge, which is stuff coming out of the mouth, things like that.
Are we talking about like burps and farts and stuff? What are we talking about?
I'm talking like bubbling fluid coming out of the mouth, like pouring out of the mouth.
Jesus. There are stories of the dead, when their muscles contract, they might sit up on the table or groan. Is that true, Dan?
Okay, they will groan, yes. All sound is air passage through the larynx. When you're lifting a body off of a floor or off of a bed and you're shifting it over to your mortuary cot to take them back to the mortuary or whatever, when you move a body, it will groan because air is trapped inside the lungs and the movement causes that air to be pushed out. And so they will make a groaning noise.
No.
Yep.
Hell no, Dan.
Yeah,
I'm out. You know what I'm saying?
True. That is true. Sitting up is not. Sitting up is not. The problem with that is that it takes so many muscles for you to sit up that when your body goes into rigor, as certain muscles release, it can cause a twitch. But to actually sit up would require all the muscles in the back to release at the same time and all the muscles in the front to not release. Does that make sense?
All right. All right, but back to the groaning. I'm lying there peacefully, hands folded across my chest, big smile on my face because I've lived a beautiful life and I died surrounded by my loving family and friends. And in my short lifetime, everybody on the planet has rejected religion and become atheists. So I'm very happy at death, right?
Yes.
And you come to lift me gently out onto the gurney, and I go, what? What's it sound like, Dan? What's it sound like?
Like that. It's just enough air passage across your larynx.
Now I'm creeped out. But it doesn't bother you at all?
No, it doesn't bother me at all. So no, I've had far worse than that. I've had bugs, and I've had decomps, and I've had you name it. So no, I don't get grossed out by any of that. So it doesn't bother me a
Dan?
bit.
You know, if you're my guy, if you're the guy that comes to get me, I'm going to like swallow a whistle right before I pass out. I'm just going to say, you know what? I'm going to totally jack with his mind. This'll get under his skin. He thinks he's impervious. So, so the blood is drained and the embalming fluid, and then what? Do you put me in the fridge for a few days to the funeral, or what?
No, once you're embalmed, we don't have any reason to put you in any refrigeration unless it's going to be more longer than a week. Embalmings will hold. It's kind of debated on how long they'll hold because most bodies don't sit out for months. But there will be cases where we'll, not us, but there are cases where people will have somebody embalmed for weeks or months before they are buried. We will do that on rare occasions, and that's only for military veterans who are going to be buried at Arlington. And that's because Arlington's got about a year backlog. So if you die, it takes a year before you can be buried in Arlington. So we'll do, on those cases, we'll stick them in a cooler, but most of the time the embalming will hold up to 80 years, give or take.
So I'm out. I'm room temperature. I'm just...
Absolutely.
I've got good preservatives going on. Like
you've got good preservatives going on. The tissue is nice and firm so that, you know that there's not any kind of fluid going on in there. The facial features have been set so that you have a pleasing appearance when people see you.
Do I have makeup?
We put makeup on everybody. Women obviously get more than men, but the thing you don't have when you're dead that you do when you're alive, obviously, is blood pumping through your skin, which causes you to have a more natural complexion of what you're used to looking at. So even with the embalming fluid and dyes that we use, we'll have to put on some surface makeup just to kind of help bring out that normal look that people are used to seeing. Your lips also lose color. They don't turn black or anything like that unless you're doing decomp, which is accelerated decomp. It's down the line. But we use makeup, and we use airbrush makeup, and we use pancake makeup and liquid makeup, and I do hair, I do makeup, I dress people. We do cut the clothing down the back, so if there is a zombie apocalypse, there's going to be a lot of naked-ass zombies.
Always be prepared.
That's right.
You just can never be too safe.
Exactly.
By the way, if you're joining us, I'm talking with Dan Nicholas. He is a funeral director. He's a mortician, undertaker, embalmer. I don't know if you'll be able to do much with me. I'm going to need something under the eyes for dark circles. Just try to make me not look tired while I'm lying there.
We have concealer for that. We have concealer for that.
I need concealer. Okay. Actually, if you can make me look like Hugh Jackman, I would like that to be my last wish. It's going to take you a while.
Well, we can do it.
Dan, have you ever had somebody who the family wanted open casket and you're like, this is a bad idea? Like for whatever reason, maybe it's a violent death. And you had to have that conversation?
Yes, I have, and ultimately they win out. Because fundamentally we are a service, we're providing a service, we are helping them. And so it's their call. We explain to them what is happening. We explain to them, we try to gloss over things and not get into specifics because, it upsets people. People are scared of death. But, we try to explain to them what the process is and what's happening and why it's a bad idea. And if they still say, this is what we want, then that is what we have to do. And we'll say, listen, we'll do everything in our power to make them as presentable as possible. We just ask that you come in first to make a final decision before you decide to have that open casket,
Do you think that's about closure? Like if they didn't see them, they maybe couldn't convince themselves that they were truly gone?
Absolutely. That is probably the number one thing that people don't understand about funerals is that it's closure. And seeing the person confirms in their minds that the person has passed. And even with we get a lot of what's called direct cremations nowadays, which are people that they just want a cremation. There's no services. There's no nothing. We don't, they don't spend much money. Don't do anything. Just cremate me and then take home the ashes or dump the ashes or whatever they want to do with them once they get them from us. The problem with that is that a lot of times extended family and friends never get the closure because they never saw them. And they never saw them that they had actually passed. And so in their mind, there's always that, I wish I would have seen them. I wish I had closure. And I get that a lot, especially from repeat families who come back to us, when another death occurs and they change their mind and say, we don't want to have just a cremation. We want to have a memorial service. Because even then, even if you can't see the body, having a service of some sort, a memorialization or a celebration of life or something to help get that closure is something that a lot of people seem to be missing nowadays with the direct cremation trend.
We're creatures of ritual. I mean, human beings, we need that structure in so many ways. I've checked the organ donor card on my license and I'm thinking cremation or, fertilize a tree with me. I mean, I'm not going to be around to really care.
Right.
But, I also want to make sure that those left behind suffer the least amount possible. So then I have another conversation. I'm like, well, geez, if I cremate, is that going to cheat them out of the opportunity to truly grieve? I guess other people have these discussions, right? Well, it's not just about me. I got to think about my kids and my siblings and my best friend and that kind of thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. The thing is that when we die, we don't care anymore. I mean, whatever you may believe, whatever superstitions you may have, ultimately, nobody's come back and told us that we did anything wrong, after they've died. So, they don't care or they don't come back to let us know. So fundamentally, the whole thing is about the people who are left behind, and you want to give them the opportunity, the bereaved, the chance to find the closure that they need.
But having said that, Dan, I mean, I'm sure you've seen funerals hijacked against the wishes or what would have been the wishes of the dead. I see it all the time. Somebody passes away and some pastor comes in and hijacks somebody's death and builds their soapbox upon it, and it becomes about the agenda. They totally just derail the train.
Yes, I've seen that a lot. And more often than not, it's not the pastor or the priest, oddly, who does that. It's somebody in the family who has an agenda with a religion. They want the religion to be forced upon the deceased. So then they end up saying, this is what I want. Because when I talk to all these priests and pastors and ministers and whatevers, and if my family tells me that they don't want religion involved in it, they just want this person to come and actually do the service, I let them know that. And I tell them, don't read scripture, don't do this, don't do that. And they all do a good job of listening to me. But the problem is when they talk to the family, then somebody in the family says, oh, well, we think it would be nice if you went ahead and then it turns into a sideshow.
Bob's in purgatory. Someone's going to have to start praying his ass out of there. So we want to do this, and we want to, we want him kneeling at the altar, and let's have religious music. And, I can see that becoming a circus in some cases.
It does. It does. Here where I work, Catholicism is a big thing. It's very popular here. And so cremation is authorized by the Catholic Church, but tradition dies slowly. And so a lot of people freak out if anybody's been cremated in the Catholic Church. I mean, they just absolutely lose their shit. So that is something that was interesting to me moving here, because, I just don't, obviously I don't see it because, it's a body and you do with it what you want to do with it.
I remember when my grandmother died at the age of 90, they had an indoor service and an outdoor service. And at the outdoor service, as the casket was out on, I say display for lack of a better word, it was a beautiful day, but they had the casket where her face was facing to the west. And it is tradition, especially in Christian circles, to make sure that you are buried with your face facing to the east for Christ's ultimate return.
Yes.
You've heard this before, Dan?
Yes.
And part of me's thinking, well, east where? Like, from what point on planet Earth would it be east? Because if you cross a certain boundary, mile marker or whatever, then it's west or south, or I don't know where. But my family literally just got in a snit over making sure, whispering in everybody's ears, just make sure they turn that casket around so that she's facing to the east. And they were genuinely concerned. They had angst about this thing. And I'm like, she's passed away at 90. She's gone. She doesn't give a shit which way she's. And if Jesus comes back, he's not going to have too much trouble finding her.
Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, in the cemeteries, traditionally speaking, especially in Christian faiths, I would assume it's the same in the Muslim faith. I've done a few Muslim services, but generally speaking, for most of those religions, they want the body to be buried feet to the east, head to the west, so that when resurrection occurs, they all stand facing the east. The only exception to that would be the ministers, the pastors, the priests. They, hypothetically, in consecrated ground, can be facing the other direction so that they can preach to the congregation.
Oh, there's your zombie apocalypse right there.
Exactly.
That's the zombie apocalypse.
Exactly.
You've been very generous with your time, Dan.
Sure.
Just a couple more quick questions, all right?
Yeah.
And you're not required to answer this one, but, when your time comes, what's your plan? You gonna go down to the embalming room? You gonna do cremation? You gonna do something else? What?
I am going to be cremated. I have no issues with embalming. I do it almost every day. But the wife has already told me, and as I believe, it's up to the survivors. My wife's already told me she's going to have me cremated and put my ashes into a man-made diamond. So I said, hey, that's going to cost more than a regular diamond. She goes, yeah, but it'll be neat. So whatever.
And the diamond's going to go where? I mean, is she going to
I would assume that she's going to make it into a necklace and wear it, and then she's going to give it to our daughter, is what I think she said. So I'll be dead, so I don't really care, but, if it makes them happy.
I'm reminded of that quote by Mark Twain. I'm paraphrasing, where he said, I had not existed for billions of years before today, and I hadn't suffered even the slightest inconvenience from it. And that's how I feel about death. The process of dying, it might give me a pause. Certainly, I don't want there to be suffering or pain or whatnot. But the idea of not being here, the idea of being dead, I was not here for billions of years, and it wasn't any skin off my teeth, right?
Exactly.
That's how I approach it.
The way I always have believed it is, we all came from stardust and we all go back to stardust, so it's fine.
And seeing the temporary nature of this life, I don't want to be saccharine about the subject of life and death here, but being around the dead and seeing the temporary nature of life, have you become more committed in your own life to live every moment, that kind of thing? Carpe diem?
Yes. Yes. You really, truly can see how short life can be. You recognize that, the majority of my people that come across my table are well into their 70s and 80s, but there are still quite a few that are 40s and 30s and 20s and teens. So you realize how short and fleeting life is. And to my knowledge, I'm only given one go-around. I say given. I'm only have one go-around. So you might as well do what you want to with it, because this is it. This is it. Make people happy and do the best you can to be happy.
I couldn't have said it better. Dan Nicholas, thanks for your time and for your insight. A fascinating conversation. And all my best and all success in your work, okay?
Thank you, Seth. Thank you.
A friend and fellow activist named Chris Johnson has a book and a documentary film called A Better Life. And he interviewed a bunch of scientists and philosophers and activists of all stripes. And one of those was A.C. Grayling, the British philosopher and author and speaker. And Grayling had said on camera these words. He said, "I'm fond of repeating at every possible opportunity what Solon, the Athenian lawgiver, said to King Croesus. He said, 'You've got to remember that a human life is less than 1,000 months long. Do the math. Supposing you live till you're 80. What's 12 times 80? It's less than 1,000 months. Now, a third of them, 300 months, you're asleep. Another third of them, you're waiting in line somewhere. So you have about 300 months to live with passion and vividness. To live trying to do something, make something, trying to create some significance in your own life, and the lives of people you care about, and indeed the world in general. And that's quite a challenge, but it's a good challenge. And so it means that one must not waste time. As the cobblers used to say, work while you have light. So while you're here, while you have your 300 months, you must put all your energy into it. I think it's our responsibility to make meaning in life. It's quite a difficult one because most people are anxious about whether they can really think things through. It takes a lot of reading and discussing and learning and thinking to try to make a bit of progress on that front. But that's what it is to be human. We have this wonderful capacity for reflection. We have intelligence, and we should use it. A.C. Grayling from the Chris Johnson book, A Better Life. I want to live as long and as fruitfully and productively as I possibly can, but I'm not scared of death. In my own life, I feel a real sense of gratitude and fulfillment and joy to be able to be alive, to be able to connect with the world and, in some way, the universe around me, to be able to have existed. And if the universe doesn't care if I existed or didn't exist, and if there's no evidence for a heaven or nirvana or posthumous existence or reincarnation or any of that stuff, it's okay. I don't have to have a next life for this life to be a meaningful one. I don't have to have love in the next life to be able to love in this one. I don't have to seek truth in a next life to be able to seek truth in this one. Marcus Aurelius had that classic line, "It's not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." And I think those are wise words for us all. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful week. I'll see you here this coming weekend at the American Atheist National Convention in Oklahoma City. Atheists.org for details on that. And back on the radio next week. Take care.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. TheThinkingAtheist.com.